much. Mediation and arbitration. What's the difference? Garrison Klueck is here with us to help you before you go to court. We call him Bud. Bud, thanks for being here. And I know there's a lot of confusion because I'm not so sure myself. I think I've got an idea, but arbitration, mediation.
Well, they're both very popular forms of what's known as alternative dispute resolution, or it's abbreviated ADR. But they're very different, and people often do confuse them, Joe. The difference is that with arbitration, it's the arbitrator. Arbitrations are really kind of like a mini trial, although they're a lot less formal and therefore a lot less expensive than a formal trial in court. But the arbitrator will be making the decision. In mediation, that's not true.
Yeah. I think in arbitration, a lot of us know what is, if you're sports-minded at all, you know that especially in baseball, there'll be the player, and then there's the team and his agent and the judge, and then they talk him down, he talks him up, and the judge makes the final decision. Right. So same thing, the judge, or as you say, the mini judge, is the one that decides between the husband and the wife as to what happens.
Right. Arbitration is not that popular in family law. It's more within civil disputes.
Civil disputes.
And for example, when you read the fine print on when you sign a contract with a credit card company, or if you go into the hospital, those forms, as they're wheeling you out in the gurney and they're sticking forms in front of you or a loved one's face, there are usually clauses to arbitrate, because it's a lot less expensive because of the relative informality. It's usually in somebody's office. And for example, when you have a medical dispute, the medical records usually come into arbitration without actually paying to have the doctor there as a witness.
Oh, sure.
But in court, you have to pay to have the doctor there.
You got to do that.
But mediation, it's about parties. And that's more popular in my field of family law. The parties make the decision with the help of a trained professional. And for example, I went through a process called credentialing with the National Dispute Resolution Center. And it took me more than a year. You start with kind of a boot camp for mediators, and then you do a series of mediations and they watch you and critique you, and there's classes and midterms and finals. It's a whole big thing. It took me more than a year, but to have that credential is very important.
So yeah, it's quite a bit of training, obviously, and so you are accredited in that particular field. Of course, you've done it all. But now mediation, you're in the room there as well, or do you have to have somebody, or are they
mediation, yes, Joe, there's a mediator or a neutral that helps the parties come to a decision. But it's very different than arbitration, because the parties are empowered to come up with their own decision, and it actually can be quite creative. They can do things that a judge or an arbitrator cannot do because they're somewhat hamstrung by the details of the law. Parties can come up with their own creative decisions and their own creative solutions, and more often than not, they actually do it. That's another big difference. Research has shown us that when somebody is actually involved in the process and invested in the outcome, very often they actually write the check or sign the deed or whatever it is they agreed to, as opposed to when somebody in a black robe called Your Honor imposes it on them from behind, and then it's kind of a game to try to get out of, weaseling out of doing what you're supposed to do.
Well, if you want to get involved, if you are involved and you need some help, this is the man to talk to right here, all right? You just call that number you see on the screen, go to FamilyLawSanDiego.com. Because Bud has done it all. You've been involved in it. And I also know I want to bring up a personal thing here, because I know here in the last few weeks you lost your father, and our condolences go out to you, all of us here on the set. We're very sorry to hear that. And I know you wanted to say a few words here about your dad.
Joe. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about my dad. My dad was not a public man. He wasn't on television or radio, unlike his son, but he was the best read man that I ever met. He read more books than anybody I know outside of academia. He was always in the library and always reading, and certainly that search for knowledge has rubbed off on me. Dad passed away on November the 2nd, which Christians call All Souls Day, or in Mexico, El Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And Dad passed away peacefully at Grossmont Hospital, surrounded by his loved ones. And thank you for an opportunity to talk about him, because I will miss him every day of the remainder of my life, Joe.
Sure. All right. God bless you, too. And your dad, for sure. All right, Bud. Thank you. Sandy, you're living